Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Panenka podcast. I'm Callum. I'm joined here by Lewis, Jacob, and someone new today. This is Gabriel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi Callum, good to be on the pod. I'm a EFL journalist, write about various EFL clubs, and you can follow me on Twitter @_all And how are you keeping, Cal?
Right, thank you. I'm good. But today we'll be, as you can tell by the fact that we've got an EFL journalist, we'll be doing our championship season review. We're going to go through all 24 teams, give you some opinions on them, and let's get right into this with 24th in the table, Hull City, who, to put it simply, have been absolutely dreadful. What does everyone think about Hull this season?
With Hull, they've probably been like the worst championship team like I've ever seen. I don't know about you guys, but they've literally been terrible. 2 wins since Boxing Day, like 3 draws, and then they've lost the rest. The losses of Jared Bowen and Kamil Krasicki on deadline day, I believe, in January, they just completely capitulated without their 2 star players, and now they're going to be heading to League One, bottom of the league. I think they were 8th on around Christmas time as well. So they've been absolutely terrible. I don't think that was the manager's fault either. It's literally just the losses of Jared Bowen's goals as well and Kamil Krasicki as well. Like, without them, Hull just didn't have the quality at all to compete, and that was summed up by their 8-0 loss to Wigan. Like, that was completely terrible, and I don't know about you guys, but I've never seen a worse team.
From my experience, which is very little, I haven't seen much worse. I don't think you could really see much worse. If a player who leaves in January is your top scorer, and I do understand that Jared Bowen got a lot of goals and assists, and he did contribute a lot in such a short period of time, but you really should, especially if you're Hull, who were in the Premier League not too long ago. We got Marco Silva from Hull, so it's quite Watford, got Marco Silva from Hull. But, it's a bit of a strange thing to see, especially in, they've conceded 87 goals in the league, which is the most, and have a minus 30 goal difference. A team that was a Premier League team not too long ago really shouldn't be doing that, especially as well. They've had the worst possession in the Championship, and even the attack is summed up by having the second most offsides. It seems like they can't create chances, and then when they do create chances, they're poor chances that they can't capitalise on. But the next highest goal scorer has 5 goals, so it's not really a surprise that Hull went down. I don't know if anyone else wants to give their opinion on that. Hull.
Yeah, I think for me one of the big things as well with losing Bowen and Krasicki, it's their 2 best players, and they've not replaced them at all. I think many Championship clubs have struggled to lose 2 players of that quality, not replace them. It seemed like a suicide mission really, and. I think they got 6 points from Boxing Day till the end of the season. I don't think that they were 8th on Boxing Day, or they were 8th at the turn of the year, one or the other. And to fall from 8th to rock bottom, and the way they did it as well, I've never seen a capitulation like that in the league before. And certainly didn't expect it from a team like Hull, really. So it'd be interesting to see them try and bounce back next year. But yeah, I can't say I'm too impressed, and I don't know how confident I am they'll bounce back up after dropping off so roughly. I think their owners are their owners are to blame, I think, for a lot of the ongoings of the club. But I mean, I wish them all the best. I think they're a decent little club, but I can't name a worse second half of the season performance from my time as a supporter.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd add to that is, as well as like the quality that Bowen and Krasicki have had, I also think it's kind of, in a weird way, hindered them defensively, because even when they had Bowen and Krasicki, I think McCann played a 4-3-3 and he had the 2 wide forwards really high up the pitch. And I think they got away with that in the first half of the season because they had so much quality that maybe opposing teams were a little bit afraid of them. Whereas now, I think without that quality at the top end, opposing teams have been a bit braver tactically against them, and they've been able to exploit the sort of gaps in that 3-man midfield. So I think that's been an issue for them as well. And they've obviously conceded 8 at Wigan. So and that was with their 2 best centre-backs, because I think a big factor you might have thought behind the second half of the season was the injuries to people like Reece Burke and Jordan Device, but actually those 2 players started in the 8-0 loss at Wigan. So it seems like less of an excuse now, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think I saw the owner put out an open statement recently, and he said that the club definitely benefited from the player sales financially, but they just didn't put anything in. I think they tried to bring in like Malik Wilkes and people like that I think they've signed him permanently now to try and help out, but I don't think it wasn't enough really for Hull to stay up.
And I think, they also got Marcus Maddison on loan from Peterborough. I think, and he was, he's another player who's supposed to rip up the Championship. He's been linked with multiple moves, but I think it's a bit of a bad egg in the dressing room apparently. And that loan move didn't really quite go to plan. I don't think he's returning either. So I think to sum up Hull this season, it's been poor in the transfer market. They've crippled themselves essentially. And I mean, hopefully they learn from it, but I'm not too confident in saying that they will. So I think that's about all we can say for Hull.
Yeah, I mean, the last little thing to sum up Hull, and that will, it's going to sum up this relegation zone in the Championship, is that is just another example of owner incompetence, and Hull have had that for a while. And, speaking of owner incompetence, we're going to move right into 23rd in the league, which is Wigan, a team I don't think anyone wanted to see go down, a team that performed very well, only losing, I believe, only dropping points on only 2 of the dropping points, losing on 2 of the last 18 appearances, Wigan have been, sensational ever since, that poor run of form around Christmas time. But, it's strange to see, especially with teams like Sheffield Wednesday, which I believe, have been in trouble with FFP for a lot longer, but have managed to get away with it and move the suspension on to next season. Because if we're being realistic, probably Sheffield should have been punished too along with Wigan, but, that's enough about politics. We don't want to dive too much into that. Let's talk about Wigan as a team. What does everyone think about Wigan this season?
I think realistically, Wigan have actually had a very good season. They've not had, they don't have a massive transfer budget. They've been tidy with their signings, with Lowe signing him from Portsmouth, who had a great season in League One with them. They've been clever with their signings. I think was it David Marshall as well to sign him from Hull. They've made some clever signings. And again, I think they've just been a solid Championship team, which is why it's such a shock that they'll be in League One next season. And again, you say you don't want to go too much into the politics and everything, but if you look at it one way, Wigan's transfer, their business, the reason that they've been deducted their points is actually based on something that happened, I think, this year or last year. Whereas with Sheffield Wednesday, they've been breached for something that happened like a few years ago. So the fact that Sheffield Wednesday have been in this ongoing battle for much longer than Wigan have, yet Wigan have been relegated and Sheffield Wednesday, get to live another season. I don't know. It's a little bit dodgy. It's a shame because Wigan have had a good, solid season. I think if Wigan were to have stayed up, I think the Paul Cook would have stayed. I think they'll be, maybe looking to even mount a playoff push next year. I know it seems like a big statement, but if you look at the Championship roster that we've got coming up, it's a very poor Championship. I think a lot of teams are going to be looking at it thinking we have a real chance this year. And Wigan could easily be one of those teams, especially considering the form they're in. So, it's a massive shame. But I mean, I can't say too much more than that. They had a good season for a team, for a team like Wigan. I think they did have a good season. And it's just a shame with the points deduction that they can't do anything about staying up in the league.
Yeah, I think their points deduction came very out of the blue. I don't think anyone was expecting it at all. But it's just really disappointing. Obviously, they've had really good players like Jay Dunkley. I think has been really good. He's the only defender that's won Championship Player of the Month this season. Kiefer Moore as well has been a revelation. Obviously now linked with like 4 or 5 Championship clubs. He scored 10 goals, got 4 assists this season. Jamal Lowe, 6 goals, 5 assists as well. Wigan played really well, and it's a shame that they've gone down to League One. But I think it depends who they let go, because obviously I know they've let go of I think it's James Weir, I think, for like 500,000 to Brighton, and they've let go of another one to Tottenham. I know Joe Gelhardt, their striker, has been linked with Leeds. So it depends who they get rid of. But if they get rid of most of their youngsters and try and keep hold of most of their senior squad, I don't see why they can't just come straight back up. They definitely have the quality for it, as shown. It just depends whether they can sort their finance.
Yeah, it's the strange thing about Wigan is you even look at the simple stuff like, they haven't been looking like a relegation team in any sort of thing, It's a bit strange to see a relegated team with a plus goal difference, even if it's just +1. You don't really ever see that in any league. But I just want to talk a little bit about Kiefer Moore, and it won't be too long before we move. But he's been, it's quite shocking to see someone who has the 11th best average rating in the Championship get relegated. He's also, he's been a big aerial threat, winning 8.3 aerial duels a game, which is, insane. Then you've got people like Anthony Robertson, and even Kieran Dowell started to turn around, from his poor spell at, I believe it was Derby at the start of the season. But yeah, it seemed like everything started to gel for Wigan. So, Gabriel, I can imagine you've got quite a lot you might want to say about Wigan.
Yeah, they've been really strong in the second half of the season. I think maybe some of their performances towards the Christmas period kind of hinted that they might have that upturn in form. And I think after winning 3-2 at Birmingham on New Year's Day, they've since really kicked on, and it's just fantastic run of form. Probably one of the best teams in the Championship in terms of form in that period. You mentioned Kiefer Moore. I think he'd be a fantastic signing for almost anyone in the Championship, because he's a target man in the sense that he's tall and good in the air, but I think also he's got a bit more mobility than a lot of target men, so he could be the real complete striker at this level.
Yeah, so we all think it is quite unfortunate for Wigan to go down. As you know, Wigan, you could even say Wigan had quite a lot of potential going into next year if they would have stayed up and managed to keep all their signings, especially with how well the team was managed and how well the team seemed to play towards the end of the season. But then we move into a team who, at 21st performed with a big, great. Oh, sorry, no, we're not. We're at 22nd, which is, I do apologise, which is the final relegated team, which is Charlton Athletic. A bit of a strange one to talk about because, this may be just because it's me, but it doesn't seem like Charlton really did much. They were just the stereotypical, fighting for the relegation, fighting to get out of relegation in the Championship. And, seems like they could have done it, but just, poor performances against a team like Leeds, which I believe, did Leeds even have the full starting 11 out there when it happened? I'm not completely sure, but they're just a bit of a weird one, They've dropped. Lyle Taylor has got 11 goals. Jonathan Williams has 5. They've been okay. Josh Cullen has been really good, and as someone who is from Bradford and has followed Bradford, watching Josh Cullen be one of probably their best performer in the Championship is fun to watch, and it is, like I mentioned in the West Ham rebuild that we did. It might be interesting to see him maybe play a backup role to someone at West Ham, but. Does anyone want to say something about Charlton? Because to be brutally honest, I do not have much to say about
them. I think Charlton actually started the season off quite brightly, if I remember. So it was, I remember they beat us 3-0. Absolutely sat us down when we went to play them earlier in the season. And they looked quite a good team. Obviously, they had Conor Gallagher on loan from Chelsea, and it definitely didn't help them having him withdrawn and sent off elsewhere. But yeah, obviously, I think there was contractual issues mixed with injuries for Lyle Taylor, which kind of saw him step out of the team towards the end of the season. I think it's just one of those teams, really, where they're a team that come up and you're sort of looking at them the whole season, wondering when they're going to confirm relegation. And they stayed outside of the relegation zone for a very long time. But eventually, yeah, they do drop into it, and I think rightly so. I don't think they're quite cut out to be a Championship team just yet. But yeah, I think like you said, there's not really much to go off for Charlton. They're not at the top of the charts for anything. They're not really at the bottom of the charts. They've not really got many standout players. So I think it's probably fair that they've been relegated. And yeah, well, I mean, it remains to be seen if they can mount a push to get promoted again. I don't see why not, but definitely over the course of the season, I think they kind of tailed off towards the back end. So it's probably the right result for them to go down.
Yeah, I think one thing that definitely hindered them was the fact that Lyle Taylor didn't want to come back after the restart and play along with Chris Solly as well. Obviously, Lyle Taylor was Charlton's goal. Remember, they picked up 14 points from their first available 21. They were top of the league. They came to the Majewski and won 2-0, and their fans were thinking that they were going to go up, and obviously now they've gone down. I don't know. They just kind of, after that, from that point onwards, there was no form. They just kind of lost it, and it's sad to see, because when they came up from the playoffs, I think everyone tipped them to go back down, so I don't think it's really much of a surprise. But I feel bad for Lee Bowyer purely because I think what he had to work with, especially with Charlton's owner situation still going on, even after Roland Desachles has left. I just feel quite bad, but obviously I think he's going to be leaving, or it sounds like he's going to be leaving anyway. He's been rumoured with a lot of championship jobs. He was rumoured with the Birmingham job before that got taken, the Bristol City job as well. So yeah, it remains to be seen what happens with that. But I think they've definitely got the squad to definitely push back up. But they obviously will have lost now Conor Gallagher and Josh Cullen and Lyle Taylor, 3 key players as well. So it depends. They're probably actually Dylan Phillips as well. I think it's been one of the better goalkeepers in the league this season. It's been linked with like 4 or 5 championship teams for this upcoming season as well, especially as seen as a lot of championship teams are in need of a goalkeeper. So it looks like Charlton are going to be losing a lot of their best players, and we might not see them in the championship for a while.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else has anything more to say about Charlton before we move on to the last team.
Yeah, I think they've been really good without the ball this season, actually. Like, in terms of like the way they press in the first half of games, and then the second half you tend to see them put in really committed last-ditch blocks on the line, defending their penalty area really well. And I think what's actually hindered them is not having enough quality on the ball always, because when they're in really good form at the start of the season, they had Conor Gallagher, who's made a massive impact at Swansea in the second half of the season. He's got that energy and ability to pick out a pass, and then he's picking passes for someone like Lyle Taylor, who's a real poacher. And I think, with all respect to Macaulay Vaughan, who I think is a very willing runner and sort of gets in behind and things like that, he was playing National League football last season for Leyton Orient, and I don't think he's as proven a finisher perhaps as someone like Lyle Taylor. So they've been good without the ball, but just missed that bit of quality in possession. I think that's why they've gone down.
Yeah, so I feel like that's all we've got to say about Charlton. But then let's move on to a team that 21st performed the Great Escape. It's probably surprised all of us. Even though they did have a good run of form towards the end of the Championship season, but I don't think anyone expected them to beat Brentford to survive, and that's Barnsley. A team that I've been quite interested in this season. It has seemed that bringing Struber in did make an impact and did help them survive relegation. It's quite weird that before the restart, I believe them and another team we'll come to talk about soon were expected to be relegated. Both of them have managed to survive, showing, how, strange the Championship can be at times. But, let's get talking about Barnsley. What's everyone got to say?
I think Barnsley this season, it's another one of those teams that, similar to Charlton, you're sort of looking over your shoulder the whole season thinking, when are they going to sort of confirm that they've gone down? And I think, obviously, you do have to take into account that Barnsley would be relegated if not for Wigan's point deduction. So I think they were quite lucky to stay up. But, they're not a bad little team. They kind of pulled together when it mattered most. And it's not like it was pure luck. They did get a good result away at Forest, who were chasing the playoffs. Obviously the last game of the season, getting a great result at Brentford. Like, they've beat big teams, they've got results against good teams. So they're sort of, in a way, they've proved their worth, that they're fully capable of of having good competition in the Championship, of being a good competitor. But for me, my overriding sense is that it's still, they probably should have gone down if not for Wigan. But it'll be interesting. I think they've got an interesting team, quite a few decent young players. I think for me, Luke Thomas stands out as they signed him from Derby, so I know a little bit more about him than the other youngsters they've got. But they're a tidy little team. I'm not too confident they'll stay up next season. I think that might be too much of an ask, but that remains to be seen. But I mean, if they stay up for 2 seasons in a row, then they could probably mount successful challenge then and become a stable championship team. But I think for me, they're not quite at the standard of the teams in mid-table at the minute. So we'll see. But yeah, they've had a good season staying up. They've definitely fought well to remain in the league. But I think for me, the case that Wigan kind of getting a point deduction helps them stay up. It's a bit of a bittersweet taste in my mouth, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, like Jacob said, I think Barnsley, they've had this problem over the last couple of years where they keep bouncing between Championship and League One. They've never had a stable Championship team at all. Obviously, Daniel Stendhal after last season, or the season before, obviously winning the league with like one of the youngest teams in the league, and their oldest player was 25 when they came up from League One. So they've got like a base of young players that they can definitely build on and bring and use or fulfill their potential. And Gerhard Struber, that managerial change was probably the biggest in the season. He makes Barnsley press. They're so attacking. They probably, like Jacob said, against Nottingham Forest and Brentford, they probably should have even beaten Leeds as well. They got unlucky because of that own goal. I'd say they're probably up there with one of the better teams to watch. Their pressing intensity and stuff like that. Like, I think next season they should definitely push on once Struber brings more of his signings in. Obviously, in January he brought in Michael Solbauer, which was really important for Barnsley's defence, because that was one of their main problems, leaking goals. And then Ludovic as well, and Ritzmeier, I think his name is. There are other Austrian players. So I think if he brings more of his own players in, maybe younger ones as well, to keep with what they're going on right now, I think they'll be quite good next season, and I think they'll surprise people.
Yeah, so I believe that's it for Barnsley, unless anyone else has got anything more to say. Right.
Well, I think they've put in some really good performances, and I think they fully deserve to stay up. And Corley Woodrow's had a great season for them, and really impressed with the job that Gerhard Struber's done there for sure.
Yeah, so now let's move on to 20th in the table, which is Birmingham City. A team that I think there's only one person we should have talk about this team. And I believe it's only just right if Gabriel starts us off about Birmingham.
Yeah, it's been not the best season for Blues. I mean, I think I was feeling fairly optimistic about us, during the lockdown, because we were in pretty good form at that point, and I think the defeat to Reading ended quite a long and decent run, and we played all right against Reading, I thought. So generally, I was kind of feeling at that point like, we've got something towards the top 10 squad and get Jake Clark, Salter and Hogan back, and maybe we could make a push next season. But I think any sort of optimism among Blues fans has kind of dissipated after our performances since the restart. Where really, apart from the Charlton game where we drew and maybe West Brom away, it's been really poor. We've conceded a lot of goals and I think we haven't won a game. So really disappointing from that point of view, and we've pretty much just limped over the line, and it's starting to look like maybe more of a rebuild than I anticipated. Perhaps we've obviously got the Jude Bellingham money, which should help us, and Ita Karanka's now head coach. He's won promotion before with Middlesbrough, so fingers crossed he can lead us forward. But I don't think we should expect fireworks straight away. I think this is very much a big rebuild for the club, really.
Yeah, I think I agree with Gabriel, because realistically, Birmingham they're not a small club. For a team the size of Birmingham to not frequently, but over the last few seasons, there've been quite a few seasons where they've narrowly avoided relegation. Obviously, they had the great escape a few years back, which I'm sure you remember. And obviously, this season, for a club the size of Birmingham they could, up until the last day of the season, they could have been relegated if results had gone the wrong way. I think it's time now for Birmingham to start trying to mount more of a push. I think it's time for them to kind of establish themselves as a contender. And next season's a great chance to do that. Like I've already mentioned, it's quite a poor lineup of teams. Aitor Karanka's a well-established championship manager, so they've done very well getting him in. And I don't see any reason why not. If they get the right people in, if they recruit well, Maybe Panenka can call a few of his old pals up and see if they'll come and help out. I don't see why Birmingham can't finish a lot higher next season. I'd be very surprised to see them near the bottom again. Maybe mid-table, maybe within a chance of playoffs. But I think to get anywhere near the playoffs, they're going to have to recruit well, and Panenka's going to have to pull off some sort of miracle. But I think definitely, I don't think Birmingham fans are going to have to worry about looking over their shoulder next year. I think they're going to be stable next year. And I think obviously this is a review, not a preview, so I need to stop talking about next year. But on the base of the season, I think it's been disappointing. The emergence of Jude Bellingham was obviously positive, but he's now left for Borussia Dortmund. But those funds that they've brought in could be invaluable to Birmingham. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next season with them.
Yeah, I thought Birmingham were looking pretty promising. I thought that Alvaro Jimenez and Fran Villalba, I thought they were really going to kick on and be really good. Obviously, both coming from Spain. Villalba very highly rated at Valencia, but it just hasn't worked out for them. Obviously, they both shipped off in January on loan. I think Jimenez has now left permanently to Cadiz, who are now in the Liga. I thought they were going to kick on, especially when they played against Reading at the Majestic. I thought Birmingham were a pretty decent side. Bellingham looked really good in the midfield, and I thought Jimenez when he came off the bench was nice. But I don't know. I think they've just got that. I think it's more stuff going on in the background that's kind of hindered them. I can't see Birmingham reinvesting most of the Bellingham money as they should. I feel like the owners will probably just keep hold of it, and I think Karanka's definitely got a big job on his hands. But I think with some of the Spanish players that Birmingham already have, I feel like it's sort of made for him to join. Obviously he did really well at Middlesbrough coming up to Premier League, and then probably shouldn't have been sacked from Nottingham Forest as well. I think they were near the playoffs at the time. So I think Karanka's definitely got a good shot.
Yeah, Birmingham under Karanka will be quite interesting. We saw what he did with Middlesbrough, and Birmingham have had a few players that have stood out this year. Obviously everyone talks about Jude Bellingham, but you've got Lucas. We're going to call him Jut because I have no idea how to pronounce his last name. Getting 15 goals and 3 assists. Christian Peterson looks like he was quite a good player, but even when Scott Hogan first came in, Scott Hogan looked like he was going to take the league alight. I believe he won the Player of the Month award in 1 year, and he really did look like he was going to impress. But Birmingham have got a lot of money from the Jude Bellingham signing. If they can invest it right, we could see Birmingham pushed on this year. But I think that's what we've got to say about Birmingham. Right, so moving on to 19th in the Championship table, we have Luton Town, a team that's been quite interested in the Championship this year, a team that everyone probably thought were going to go down, but have managed to survive. What's everyone's opinions on Luton Town this year?
I think Luton have done very well. I think I was definitely one of the people that thought they were going to get relegated as well. I don't think I was the only one. As I say, I think a lot of people assume they'll just go straight back down. But they're a team that sort of remind me of when Burton Albion got promoted a few years back. Quite a small club, but they've stuck together at the right time, and they've managed somehow to pull off this miracle of staying up when really it was against all odds. Obviously, when Burton Albion stayed up the first season, they went straight back down the second season. So it'll be interesting to see if Luton will learn from the mistakes that similar sized clubs have made after staying up in the Championship, or if they'll actually build on it and become a stable Championship side. But they're definitely a club that I've enjoyed watching this season. Very interesting team. They do have a very unique style of play as well. So I don't have too much to say on Luton, other than the fact that it seems like everything kind of came together at the right moment for them. They're in a relegation zone practically what was the whole season. So to pull it off in the last sort of 7-8 game weeks to mount, what they did to stick together as a unit, like they proved. It was very impressive, and personally, I hope they stay up again because I really like the team spirit they've got on offer. And they've got their manager back as well, haven't they? Is it Jones?
Nathan Jones, yeah.
No, yeah. So obviously he can have a good time at Stoke, so he's back at Luton now, and he did well the first time round. So yeah, it's going to be interesting next season. But I think that Luton have done a very good job staying up this year. And yeah, anyone else have anything to say on them?
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of Nathan Jones. Didn't quite work out for him, did it, in the first sort of half of the season at Stoke? But I think he's learned quite a lot from that. I mean, maybe at Stoke he was very kind of loyal to the diamond system there, whereas I think at Luton he showed a bit more adaptability. And really, I think the signing of Cameron Carter-Vickers was massive for the Haz, because first half of the season they were very vulnerable defensively, but I think since he's come in, they've shored things up. Harry Cornick's looked very good as well in since the restart, and James Collins scored the goals for them as well. So, yeah, really impressive job from Nathan Jones. And apart from that 4-0, 5-0 defeat at home to Reading, it's been really impressive. They got a point at Leeds, which is very rare. So, yeah, fantastic turnaround from their point of view. And I didn't really see it coming when they were adrift just during the lockdown.
Yeah, I thought when they rehired Nathan Jones, I thought it was quite weird because obviously we were in the middle of lockdown. They sacked Graham Jones and obviously brought in Nathan Jones a couple of days later. And I thought it was quite strange, but it seemed to be a revelation bringing him back to Luton. He's revived the team. They only lost once since the restart to Reading 5-0, which was just a bad day at the office. But I don't know. For me, they've still got a League One squad. I don't know if they've really got enough quality. I feel like Nathan Jones just purely is just played to their strengths, which is why they've gone and now stayed up. But I didn't realise that James Collins had got 14 goals and Harry Cornick had got 9. I didn't realise that they were as good as that. But I don't know. Luton they're probably like the worst team I've seen us play, but that's purely because we beat them 3-0 and 5-0. So I can't really give them too much credit off those performances. But I don't know. I think under Nathan Jones, obviously getting that draw away at Leeds, which is quite a good result. I don't know. I feel like Luton have just got quite a League One squad. I think if they really need to bring in some extra quality, obviously they've just got rid of Callum McManaman and I can't remember the other player is anyway. No, Jacob Butterfield. And obviously losing Izzy Brown as well, 7 assists. Obviously he had quite an injury hit campaign, but I thought he was one of their key players as well creatively. So they'll have to bring in a lot of quality going into next season if they are to stay up. But overall, I think they've had a fairly decent season to stay up.
Yeah, I think if you look at a team like Luton, it's still quite a League One squad. You have got the talent like Izzy Brown and Cameron Carter-Vickers, and even James Collins. People thought he may have been one of those people who can bag them in League One, but just can't in the Championship due to the technical ability stand up. But he has got 14 goals this season. He's been quite impressive. He's been able to knock them away in a team that that struggle to keep possession. It's a bit strange with Luton. Then a lot of the players by themselves as well. There's a lot of individual errors in the team. Not like team errors. But it is quite strange to say. It's quite surprising that they've stayed up. I think that's impressed everyone. But I think it's quite interesting to see what Luton will do next year. Will they go drop, or will Nathan Jones be able to keep them up in the Championship? But yeah, let's move on straight into 18th. A team that probably surprised most Premier League fans watching this, that they're down here. It's Huddersfield Town, and I think it can even surprise quite a lot of people with how good players like Callum Grant have been this season, and even some of the team players that they have that performed quite well in the Premier League, like Schindler, who was quite a decent centre back in the Premier League. But I don't know what's everyone got to say about Huddersfield this season.
I think Danny Cowley did a really good job in his time there, because when they took over, they'd bottom of the league after the first 9 games. Had Jan Sievert in charge, and then Matt Hudson on an interim basis. And I think to get them out of trouble, he showed quite a lot of pragmatism, really, because I think his Lincoln side had been built on strong players who are very good in the air, and that's why they're very good at set pieces. And I think at Huddersfield, he's not really had any aerial specialists in the side. Alan Grant is their top scorer. He's very much the kind of poacher, needs a strike partner. And then there's people like Tommy Elphick and Bindley who are decent organisers and fairly intelligent, but they're not sort of particularly strong. So it's been a real test of him to sort of adapt. And I don't necessarily know if I agreed with the decision to part company with him, considering it's pretty much mid-table form since he took over. And I think he had to stop a losing rock from the Premier League, where probably one of the lowest goal-scoring sides in the top flight we've seen for a very long time. So I think he's done a good job there, Danny Cowley, and I'm surprised the board decided to get rid of him. Maybe it's a bit of a change in the ownership situation where new people coming in at boardroom level and they want something a bit different with Carlos Corberán. But I think it's very harsh on Danny.
And I think as well with Huddersfield, it's another case of recruitment being a big issue for them. Obviously, when they got relegated, they lost Aaron Moy. I think he played one game, and that was against Derby. Philip Billing, obviously, they lost. They lost Smith, who, although he wasn't like a key player, he was a regular for them in the Premier League. They lost quite a few players that were key to them in the Premier League, and they got quite a nice figure back. They got a nice fee to spend, and if they'd done their research properly, they probably could have signed a few very decent Championship players, and that's to go alongside players like Callum and Grant, who they already had. So it's not like they were entering the Championship with a poor squad. They had a very good squad, definitely very capable of performing in the Championship, which is why it was so shocking to see them at the bottom of the league for so long. But I think with Huddersfield, I don't see them in any fear of going down next season. I think they do have a good squad. It's very disappointing though, because I personally thought that they could challenge for the playoffs this year, and I was sort of laughed at for suggesting that at the start of the season, and rightly so, it turns out, because they were very poor. But I think again, a lot of the teams down the bottom, it's easy just to go, oh, they should have recruited better. But you can't really say that to some teams, like your Barnes or your Charlton, the teams that don't really have the same funds. Whereas Huddersfield will have had the parachute payment. They've also had individual payments from selling some of their star players, and they've just not spent it in the right places. So I think they'll have to look into using a bit more of that money wisely next season. But yeah, I think that's all I've got on Huddersfield.
Yeah, I think they've definitely got a squad that shouldn't be down at the bottom at all. They should definitely be at least pushing for playoffs, especially with the likes of Christopher Schindler, who's probably a step above this level. And even young players who they've had on loan, like Trevor Chalobah. And I think Juninho Una as well has been a really good midfielder. I don't know. Huddersfield are an odd one. I just think behind the scenes again. Obviously now that they sacked Danny and Nicky Cowley and brought in Carlos Corberán, they've got a new direction going on. They sacked I think Mark Hudson and one of their coaches as well. They're probably going through the whole club and just reshaping. And I don't know. Huddersfield is just a bit of an odd one. I think the Cowleys, they did well in their first season in the Championship. I think that was probably why they maybe just a little bit out of their depth at first. But I think if they had kept them on for next season, I definitely think they would have pushed on, bringing in their own players. They brought in Harry Toffolo from Lincoln in January, and obviously he was one of their own players. So I don't know. I think if they should have given them another season. But obviously, if Huddersfield want to go in that another direction, then fair enough. But I think the Cowleys will be landing a Championship job very soon.
Yeah, so if we move straight on to 17th, it's probably another team that no one expected to be this low down the table. It's Middlesbrough. I believe it was Tony Pulis that they replaced with Woodgate. The fans were complaining about the football. We saw this from teams like West Brom before. They get rid of a manager like Pulis and they give someone else a chance, and it just doesn't work out for them. Woodgate just didn't really work out to the point where they had to, replace him with Neil Warnock towards the end of the season, drag him out of retirement for about the 450th time. It's quite interesting to see. But what does everyone think about Middlesbrough this season? Because they have been quite interesting.
I thought Middlesbrough were quite a different one. Obviously, Jonathan Woodgate then had this whole philosophy of bringing through young players. So we've seen the likes of Ainsley Pears and Spence and Coulson as well just come through. I think at the start of the season they definitely struggled. They were the worst form team near the start, and then they picked up a lot of form around January, February time, and then it just kind of dropped off again. And obviously, they got rid of him and brought in Neil Warnock, which is probably a good appointment, safe one, especially at the position the club are in, finance-wise. Obviously, they're still having to deal with the Premier League money that they had and getting rid of some of those players on Premier League wages. Rudy Gusted leaving would probably help that. But yeah, I think they've definitely, with the young players that Jonathan Woodgate has brought through, I think he's definitely given those players a stepping stone, and he's given something that the club probably needed. They had quite an old squad, quite an ageing squad. So I think Jonathan Woodgate has set it up for another manager to push it forward. I'm not sure if Neil Warnock's the right manager to push them forward, essentially. Obviously, he did that with Cardiff, but I mean, I hope he proves me wrong, but at the same time, like, I don't know if Middlesbrough will be pushing near the top of the table anytime soon. I think next season they just need to make sure that they're safe and mid-table.
I think as well, Steve Gibson, the owner of the club, I don't think he's quite had the right philosophy going into the season. I think by signing Jonathan Woodgate as a manager, it seemed very iffy. I don't see where his managerial credentials came in to step straight in to a championship job. I mean, it's a little bit biased because obviously last season we had Frank Lampard at Derby. It was his first chance at management. But I think there's a difference between a Frank Lampard and a Jonathan Woodgate. It's not. I don't think Woodgate's going to take over the dressing room and all the players are going to look up to him and instantly respect him and be like, "Oh my God, it's Jonathan Woodgate." He doesn't have that same effect that a player like a Gerrard or a Lampard going into their first managerial spells would have had. But I thought from the get-go, I thought that was a very strange appointment. I didn't quite see the attraction there. So for me, was I surprised to see them struggling? No. But was I surprised to see them so far down the table? Yes. And obviously Gibson's had his fair few cracks at our owner as well. So I was quite happy to see them down there bottom of the league, I can't lie. But with Warnock going in, I think as soon as I saw that Warnock had gone in, I knew they were safe. You're not going to get relegated with Warnock in charge, not with how poor the other teams below them were. And I think it would be interesting with Warnock in charge because he's good at getting teams from it. I think the Cardiff team that he took up, there weren't anything special. I think with Warnock in charge, he's a very good manager. But I think he's got a tough job in his hands with Middlesbrough, yeah. And I think, I think they could definitely be up there again soon. But I think they could also fall into a trap of becoming a mid-table championship club. I think they need to be wary. I think they need to be careful because they are a team that have had the ability to kind of bounce up and down recently. You'd never be surprised to see them up near the top of the league. But I think based off last season, they have a lack of star players at the minute. It's another team that need to invest heavily if they want to try and get back up into the top 6, top 10 in the league. And that remains to be seen whether they'll do that. But I think they could definitely fall into the trap of becoming like a mid-table team, and that's not something that Middlesbrough fans will want because they'd argue they're better than that. They'd argue they deserve a chance to be in the Premier League still. So it would definitely be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern for me would be the lack of identity because they had Tony Pulis in charge in that 18-19 season. They replaced him with Jonathan Woodgate, and I think that was kind of the start of what Steve Gibson hoped would be a developmental project because Woodgate had been part of the coaching staff of the previous regime. He knows the club. He's got an idea of all the players they have, especially the young players. And I think that was pushing on young players was kind of part of what he wanted to try and do. But naturally, I think it's really hard for any young manager to make their debut in the Championship. And I think that although he had a good run sort of around the winter period, that ultimately really sort of was difficult for him. And he ultimately lost his job. And what's interesting now is rather than going for maybe a better version of Woodgate who can still act in that head coach role, the sort of structure that Gibson began. He's now gone back to an old school manager, a bit like Pulis in Neil Warnock, and Warnock's won promotions before. I think his promotion with Cardiff was either his 8th or his 9th promotion, so he's certainly got the track record. But it's just interesting to see how the club is going from one philosophy to another very quickly, and I don't think there's a clear vision place there, and that was something that would worry me if I was a Middlesbrough fan.
Yeah, so let's move right on to 16th. A team that a lot of people argue probably should have been relegated on the same grounds that Wigan were, and that's Sheffield Wednesday. It's been quite an interesting season for Sheffield Wednesday. They've been handing out big wages to players like Jordan Rhodes and stuff like that, and it's really, to be honest, probably hasn't worked out how they wanted it to work out. You've had players like Jacob Murphy that did seem to turn up at points, but he's a bit, Jacob Murphy's always been known to be quite inconsistent. Stephen Fletcher, has been quite good this season, but he's 33 years old. Then you've got people like Forestieri, another inconsistent. You never know what season you're going to get out of him. it's quite interesting to see that, you know, it's a really weird blend of youth and then really old players, you know. There's not really much of that middle ground in Sheffield Wednesday. And then there's also what seems to be like a strange little goalkeeper switch, you know. Kieran Westwood, who, you know, quite a good goalkeeper from what I've seen, you know, only playing 14 games. That might have been down to injury or something. Then you've got Cameron Dawson, a goalkeeper who played 23 games and has been probably one of the worst rating-wise players in the Championship to play more than like 20 games. He's been absolutely awful from what it looks like, but don't know who wants to go first and talk about Sheffield Wednesday here.
I think Sheffield Wednesday is another team that really disappointed this year. You know, as a Sheffield Wednesday fan, you certainly wouldn't be expecting to finish 16th on the table. And it's another team that have kind of capitulated in the second half of the season. If you remember towards the start of the season, again, before January, they were in the top 6. I'm sure they were. They were right up there. And they were challenging, and they were in good form as well. There was no reason that they couldn't have mounted a push for the playoffs or even to the top 2 at the time. So to see them just plummet all the way down to 16th, and I can't say I'm too surprised. I think we beat them 3-1 away from home, and when we're beating someone away from home and putting 3 past them, you know that there's something going on. And I think realistically, it's just a disappointing season for them. I don't think they had many standout players. Obviously, you mentioned Stephen Fletcher has had a good season for them, but he is aging. They're going to need someone to replace him. And yeah, I think that's about it. I think it's just a very lacklustre season for them. Definitely underperformed. But with the squad they have, I can't say I see them doing too much next season either. So I think there's not so much of a rebuilding job, but obviously taking into account their point deduction as well, that they're going to be starting with next season. I think it's going to be very, very tough for them, especially if they continue in the form they finished this season on. If they take that form into next season, then I would be a little bit worried if I was a Wednesday fan.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems at the club, to be honest. They've got Deshmon Chansiri as the chairman. I think he's put a lot of his own money into the club, but at the same time, I don't think there's been much of a direction. We've talked about the lack of identity at Middlesbrough. I think probably there at Wednesday as well, to an even greater extent, under Chansiri's regime. And I think over his time, they've been pretty over-reliant on the use of agents rather than people who are actually working for the club. There's this lad called Amadou Pachau, with whom he's gone through for a lot of his recruitment. It's changed a little bit over the last 12 months, but still concerns there over, you know, stadium issues and things like that. I think in terms of the squad, because they've not been able to recruit well, it's kind of gone a little bit stale. And yes, they got Stephen Fletcher up top, who's very useful, but there's also players who are maybe dining off being good players 3 or 4 years ago. So I think a lot of problems there. Gary Monk's taken the brunt of criticism for their form second half of the season, and I can understand that. But I also think that I don't think Monk is the main problem at Sheffield Wednesday. I think there's a lot of other problems there. And I do worry for them going into the season, especially point deduction.
Yeah, I still think there's still a chance of them still going down this season. I think Charlton have appealed it. They've got backing of 7 or 8 teams in the league. So there's still a chance Sheffield Wednesday could get relegated because the 12-point deduction would take them down. But either way, I think the second half of the season is definitely, they've just capitulated. I don't really know why. Obviously, Gary Monk is known to be quite an inconsistent manager. I think, like, example with Leeds a couple of years ago, he did really well the season, and they just capitulated near the end. I think didn't even get in the playoffs. Like key players like Stephen Fletcher are leaving, Morgan Fox. They've let go of a lot of key players at the end of the season. I don't know how well they'll do next season, especially with the financial problems. I don't know how much money the owner will be willing to put back in. But they've definitely got a squad that should be higher than that, with Barry Bannon and Adam Reach, definitely 2 players that are very good quality at this level. Sheffield Wednesday shouldn't be in this league in the first place, the size of their club, but the fact that they've just been, they need to be a lot better, and I think the fans will definitely be wanting a better season.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that Stephen Fletcher had been released. I think that's a big loss for them because they've been massively reliant on him this season.
Yeah, so that's all we've got to say about Sheffield Wednesday. But if we move on to 15th in the league, we have Stoke. You know, another team Premier League fans will be surprised to see this low down in the table. But to be honest, if you look at the recruitment, it probably even is a surprise as well. You've got players like, Nick Powell, who showed he has quality. Then you've got players like, James Chester, who when Aston Villa were promoted all the season before that was probably one of the better defenders that the team had before Tyrone Mings. There were always defensive issues before they got Tyrone Mings with Villa. But, Chester always did seem to be a bit of those people who could bring order to a defence. And then you've got, Sam Vokes, who people thought, would have brought in. He did decent for Burnley. He was one of those people for Burnley who, he was one of those strikers you never know what you could expect from him. One day you could get 2 goals, and then the next day was one of those inconsistent strikers who you thought may be able to find his feet in the Championship. But what's everyone got to say about Stoke then?
They only lost 3 of their last 13 in the league. And Michael O'Neill was such a good appointment. But that form going into next season, I think they should definitely carry that on. Their squad is definitely should be pushing higher up the table with the players they've got, like Nick Powell, as you mentioned before. I don't know. They've got Michael O'Neill pretty much just turned their season around. Obviously, I know they're still only just mid-table and stuff like that, but I think they've definitely got some key players in there. Sam Clucas with 11 goals from midfield. Tyrese Campbell in his breakout season was really good. I was surprised he signed a new deal earlier in the season. I thought he was going to try and leave at the end of the season. But I think you look at their squad and you see the type of players they have, and they definitely should be pushing able. It's just whether they can bring in a manager. Obviously, now they've got Michael O'Neill, but whether Michael O'Neill can bring in the right players and push them up the table, because I think the managerial situation has definitely been a problem since they've gone down.
Yeah, I think again with Stoke, it's a team that I think I wasn't really expecting too much of. Not going to lie, I think they had the Rowett, didn't they, the season before, and it was very poor. Didn't expect much more from him, knowing what I know about Rowett and Stoke City's team. I think the problem with Stoke's team is that bar Tyrese Campbell, there's a few other players in there, but they've got quite an old team. When you look out wide, you've got Tom Ince and James McLean, who, with all due respect, are past it in the Championship now. It's another team that they're going to need to recruit some new players, whether that's looking into the loan market or not. Not that I think they need to go into the loan market with the money I'm sure they still have from the parachute payments. But they're a team that I definitely think will be optimistic for next season. But based on the season they've just had, I think it took Michael O'Neill quite a lot of time to adjust to the Stoke team that he'd inherited. And I think you did start to see his twist on the team, his style on the team towards the end of the season. And yeah, like you say, it was good form. They dismantled Forest, in the back end of the season, which was a really, really, really good game to watch. So we'll hopefully we'll see what Stoke can bring next season. But I think based off this season, I think the majority of fans will be quite disappointed, especially with Jack Butland in particular. I think Jack Butland, I don't want to touch on him too much. It's a shame that his career's gone down the pan, essentially. His second choice keeper at Stoke now has been, and that's not for no reason either. It's not by luck. He's made countless blunders this season, and it's real poor form. And I think a problem for Stoke this year was the players that they rely on just didn't step up to the plate. But obviously, the back end of the season they've improved since lockdown, since coming back. They've been a different team. So, and heading into next season, they'll probably be looking up the table. See no reason why they can't push for playoffs next season, but definitely a very disappointing season if you're a Stoke City fan. Very lucky to avoid relegation as well in some.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jacob that I think they've got a chance to compete for the playoffs next season. I think O'Neill's done a good job there. I think really I'd just like to touch on Sam Clucas. I think he's been the most consistent player this season. He seems like he's got that sort of wide range of qualities, very energetic, and he's someone who can kind of just slot into any position or any system and kind of make the team around him tick, and what I really like about him. I think that's kind of been especially important given Michael O'Neill doesn't seem to have settled on one particular formation. We've seen him change it around quite a bit. So having people like Lucas, who have that adaptability, has been really important for them. A lot of clean sheets under O'Neill, so we're seeing some of the qualities, as Jacob and Lewis alluded to, that he displayed as Northern Ireland boss, organising team. So really impressed from that perspective. I just think the one thing with Stoke is they've not really got that complete centre forward. I think with Tyrese Campbell, you've got pace, you know Lee Gregory's going to put a shift in, and you know Sam Vokes is a good target man. But I think they're probably short of a striker who can have elements of all three of those qualities, whereas I think all of them seem to be kind of specialist range of qualities. So that's probably something for them to look at in the summer. A couple of other areas to address, but yeah, really well done to Michael O'Neill. I think.
Yeah, so let's get straight on to 14th in the table, and that is at Lewis's very own team. That is Reading. Reading have been quite an interesting team this year. They were a team that had been up towards in a playoff final and then plummeted under Amsterdam. But then this season, you've seen players like John Swift really stand out, who, you could argue probably one of the better midfielders in the Championship with his performances this year, especially when they've caught the eyes of teams like Sheffield United. Then you've got Ovi Ajari, who has been a bit of a menace to opposition defences. I believe he's up there for most. I think he's probably up there for most dribbles per game, and I believe he has the most dribbles in the Championship. He's brought a real flair to Reading that has really helped them perform. But the best person to talk about this would be Lewis. Lewis, what do you think about Reading this season?
I think it's been a good season in terms of compared to what we've had recently. Obviously, this is, since we've come down from the Premier League, this has been our third best season, which just shows how poor we've been the last couple of years. But it's nice to have some sort of stability where we are safely mid-table, whereas recently we finished the last two seasons in 20th, only just avoiding relegation one or two games before. It's nice to be a bit safe. But I think we've been in my opinion, we've probably been the most unpredictable side in the league, where we went from losing 3-0 at home to Brentford one game to the next beating Luton 5-0 away, who had been unbeaten since the restart. It's so contradicting. And I think our problem, a lot of our fans aren't really a fan of Mark Bowen and whether he can do a good job or not. But my only problem is that he doesn't seem to have a tactical system at all. He seems to change formation every single game. I think he's more playing to the other team's weaknesses and just trying to exploit them in change formations. But I think he just needs to get his own style and bring his own players in. I think I look at our squad and I think on paper we've definitely got one of the better squads in the division, but we just it's whether we can keep hold of those players. Obviously, John Swift has been linked with leaving, and Obi Ajari, we might not even be getting him permanently due to our financial situation. Obviously, we've, in the last couple of years, especially with the appointment of Ron Gourlay in 2018, and the amount of wages that he splashed out, obviously getting rid of Gunter and McCleary, Blackett and Abita will help with those wages. Obviously, we've sort of Sam Baldock as well. All these players on high wages has hindered us. But I think especially with players like Yaku Mate scoring 13 this season, 17 in all competitions, I think he's definitely been a player that's been surprising. I think he's a player that I think he's one of a kind in terms of that he's that wide target man where he's on the wing and he's big and physical, and fullbacks can't really handle him in the air and stuff like that. And I think he definitely gives us something different that other teams don't have. And I think especially with our youngsters, I think this season we've got the youngest average squad or something. We've played the most youngsters this season out of any other team, which I don't think many people really pick up on. Obviously, we've got youngsters like Tom McIntyre, and we had Gabriel Osho before he rejected a new deal coming through, and obviously Danny Loader as well before he left as well, rejected a new deal. I just think we've definitely got something going at the club. I think we just need to keep hold of Bowen. Honestly, I could see us pushing high up the table, but then I could see us being no down. I couldn't predict us at this moment in time. It depends on who we bring in, but I think this season has been a good season in comparison to the rest.
Can I just ask, Lewis, would you start Puskas on his own at front next season, or would you partner him with Lucas Jai? Because I think Puskas seems to be really talented, but I feel like he's one who needs the ball to feet, and I don't know if he's great as a lone striker.
Yeah, Puskas, I've said this all season, he has on his day, he could arguably like be a 30-goal a season striker in his division. Some of like his performances against Wigan and Cardiff definitely showed that. But then there were other games where he just missed sitters, and it was more like composure and its concentration as well. I just don't think it was really up to scratch. But for a first season in the league, I think he's definitely done well. But whether he should play up front on his own, like I remember watching him when in that game against Cardiff, it was him and Lucas João both up front, and I thought they played very well. João being obviously more of the target man and laying them off to him. But I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I feel like he does play better with someone next to him, and I think Lucas João, whenever he's injured, we've played worse. I think Lucas João's been really important. He's only played 19 games this season, but whenever he's played, we've played a lot better. And I think if we can keep Lucas João fit, I think that'll definitely help us next season, and that can kind of help Bowen with some sort of a system. I think he does want to build it around him in a sense. But I think Puskás probably works better off someone else. But I think if give him a year or two, and he'll definitely be one of the best strikers in the league.
Right, so as you can see, there is only 3 of us now, and that's because Gabriel's a very busy man and he's had to head off. So it's getting quite long. We'll be here all day if we keep up at this pace. Each person's gonna have one team for the rest of the table, and we're gonna move on next to QPR, which is Jacob's to talk about. Jacob, tell us about QPR this season.
So QPR, I mean, like I've been already saying off camera, the sort of this season been a bit of a nothing club. They've not really made a serious promotion push or top 6 push. They've not really had to look over their shoulder at the relegation zone. They've just sort of been carried by Eberechi easily. Obviously, you've got to say Samuels as well, and I think you can't not mention Jordan Hugo, who's been on loan from West Ham, who's hit double figures for them this season, been quite influential. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult really to bring anything up about QPR from a neutral point of view. They've kind of just gone about their business by themselves. They've had a few highlights thanks to Eze, or Eze, however you want to say his name. But it'll be difficult for them to keep hold of him for sure. I'm sure he'll be off in the summer now. But yeah, I think if you're a QPR fan, then I don't really think you have much to complain about. There's definitely foundations to build on, especially with the money you'll get from Eze if if he is to be sold. And yeah, I think it would be massive if they could get Hugo back on loan. He will be a big miss, but I think it's definitely a case of optimism. I don't think they're going to have to look over their shoulder next year. And I think it's just an average season for them. I don't think they can have much to complain about. And I think that's all that needs to be said about QPR, really.
Right, so now back onto me, and I'm doing Bristol City, who are next in the table. Ended up finishing 12th. Bristol City again is just the same streaky Lee Johnson that was back again this season. Obviously, they had good. They were good in patches and terrible in others. They ended the season under Lee Johnson very well, and then obviously when his staff came in, they did pretty well. Obviously, they've now got rid of him, but I think Bristol City will be disappointed again this season, having not got playoffs. How they haven't got playoffs at least once in the last couple of years is beyond me. They've got some really good players. Nicholas Eliasson has been really underrated this season. He's got one of the highest assist records in the league this season, and I think they need to get a manager that will propel them, because Lee Johnson just hasn't really. He took them from bottom of the league to mid-table playoff chasing, and then they haven't really pushed on in the last 2 years. They just haven't. They've just stayed under the playoffs, but top half is basically where they've stayed. And I don't know. There's something about Bristol City. They're not. I can't. Under Lee Johnson, you could never see them going anywhere. From our DJ, I've forgotten his name. I don't know how you say it, but he's done really well this season with 12 goals. Andreas Weimann with 9 goals and 7 assists has been good. Jamie Patterson as well. Josh Brownhill before he left for Burnley in January. Naki Wells was a good signing as well in January after his successful loan at QPR. But yeah, I think Bristol City definitely have the potential. They should realistically be a team that gets in the playoffs, but whether they are is whether they will get that next season, I'm not too sure. Depends who they get in.
So next up, I'll be covering 11th in the league, which is Blackburn. Blackburn are a bit of a weird team. They have seen up and down form. Probably ever since they got relegated, they've been one of those teams that are just championship regulars at this point. You don't really expect much from them. But this season, I feel like they may have surpassed expectations a little bit. Adam Armstrong finding his goal touch with 16 goals and 6 assists, great performances this season. And the centre backs, Lenihan and I'm going to call him Tossing, the Man City loanee, have been a really good centre back partnership. And even Stuart Downing, at 36 years old, grabbing 8 assists. It's been quite an impressive season for Blackburn, and I really feel like they can push on it. Especially since Bradley Dack got that injury. I feel like if they're able to keep a majority of this team, maybe get Tossing back on loan for a year, or if it's possible, sign him on a permanent. A full season with Bradley Dack with this team could see incredible results, especially for someone like Armstrong. Armstrong may be able to hit the 20-goal a season club with someone as good as Bradley Dack, who's still got 9 goals and an assist. Did really well, and it's quite strange to see. I think the only problem with Blackburn this year is they just struggled to keep a lead. Blackburn had seemed to get a lead in a game, and then would just seem to lose it all the time. But they're good at one of the teams that are better at defending set pieces, and they can finish their chances quite well. Blackburn are one of the teams I can see maybe climbing up the table a little bit more next season.
Right, it's my turn again. Got Derby County, of course. And I think this is my speciality, my special subject now. But I think going into the whole season, I think you can't not talk about obviously the incident that happened at the start of the season with a couple of our players getting into a car crash. I'm sure you have to be living under a rock not to hear about that one. With our club captain severely injured, out for the season, he ended up being sacked by the club. Tom Lawrence and Mason Bennett were both in court, and they were charged quite heavily. I don't think either of them allowed to drive for the time being. Bennett was shipped out on loan. Lawrence had a lot of making up to do, but he did that essentially. I think the team kind of grew from that, and for Philip Cocu's first season at the club is the first foreign manager Derby have ever had, which is a crazy stat, really. But for him to come into a club that had kind of thrown all of that onto him, especially coming off the back of such a high of the season before, it's been such an excellent season. Seeing the youth come through, we've Derby have given more minutes to youth players than any other team in the Championship this year. Obviously, you can't not talk about Wayne Rooney. England's all-time top goal scorer, Man United's all-time top goal scorer. The blend of experience and youth has been so refreshing, so good to watch. And although we did struggle at the start of the season, we couldn't buy an away win. We drew or lost wherever we went after the opening day. It took us a long time to finally get another away win. But then to the back end of the season, just before lockdown, we were in great form. We carried that on for 2 or 3 games afterwards. We were in some of the best form, along with Wigan actually, in the best form in the league. And then we had a few, we drew with Forest, and then we had a few bumps in the road where we were struggling, and we kind of became a bit complacent, and unfortunately we missed out on a playoff push that we'd sort of somehow managed to throw ourselves into at one point. But from a supporter's point of view, I'm full of optimism. I think Philip Cocu is a fantastic manager to turn the squad from what it was at the start of the season, bring through so many young players, and manage to finish 10th is so admirable. And if at the start of the season you would have said, would you take a 10th place finish? I probably wouldn't have said yes. Reluctantly, I probably would have accepted it. But a team the size of ours, and with the fan base we have, we want to be in the top 6. We want to be pushing. I want to see my team in the Premier League. But I think with Philip Cocu in charge, there's definitely more of a chance of that happening next season. I think with how poor the league's been, or how poor the lineup is for next year, I'm very optimistic. Because the young players that we've had come through have been such a bright spark, been so, like I've already said, so refreshing to watch. And yeah, in reflection, I think it's been a good season for Derby, given all the off-field matters, and barring any points deduction, which has been, touted, it's kind of been thrown around, been floated, the idea of that, which personally I don't think we're actually going to fall into. But if we do, then that'll be maybe one for another episode. But barring any point of deduction, I think there's no reason we can't challenge for top 6 or maybe even top 2 the right recruitment next season. So yeah, I'm happy as a Derby supporter based off that season.
Yeah, I just want to say this year, I think just Derby playing the top teams in the league, just definitely, I think they should have probably. I think that basically just let them down at the end of the season. But yeah, I'll move on to 9th, Preston. I thought they were very unlucky to not get playoffs. They're in the playoffs for quite a lot of the season. They've got they don't really spend a lot of money, but they've got a really quality squad. In players such as like Ben Pearson and Patrick Bauer, I thought was a really good signing from Charlton. Paul Gallagher, Daniel Johnson as well. I think they've just got a really good squad, and I think they need to invest a little bit more money than they have done in recent seasons to push on. I think at Alex Neil, they've definitely got a good manager who can obviously bring them up like he did at Norwich. And I think with the centre-backs they've got, obviously Ben Davies as well was a really good left-footed English centre-back, which you don't see many of around at the moment. I think Preston they're probably one of the best well-run teams in the league, along with Brentford. I just think they've definitely got the potential. I don't think their size of the club is like Premier League standard, but I think the way that they're going at the moment, I think they just need that little bit more quality to push into the playoffs. But I think overall, I think this season they'll take it. They're only 4 points off the playoffs, so not too far. But I think some fans may think it's a disappointment by not being in it, because obviously they were in the playoffs for quite a lot of the season. But from an outsider's point of view, I think Preston should be pretty proud of what they've done. And I think next season they should really push on the playoffs.
Yeah, so next up in 8th, we have, a team that probably quite a lot of people didn't expect to be this high up in the table, and that's, Millwall. After they, I think, had quite a disappointing second season after such a great first season. I don't think anyone really expected this from them, but bringing Gary Rowett in was just the perfect appointment for Millwall. He fits the team perfectly, and even the signings of Bartosz, we're going to call him, winning the Golden Glove this year, really impressive. Players like Sean Hutchinson have really impressed this season for them. Jed Wallace, 10 goals, 13 assists. They've found the consistency of Millwall, and they've been able to stick to it to the point where it looked like Millwall may even sneak into the playoffs in 6th, but of course, that's not what ended up happening. They're great in the air, which is quite stereotypical for a team like Millwall, but but in the end, they're just similar to a team like when I spoke about Blackburn. They struggled to keep a lead. They've had points where they've led and it's ended up in a draw or a loss. And I feel like it'd be good if they maybe could bring in another striker, because I believe they do sometimes struggle finishing the chances. And with someone like Jed Wallace, if they can, keep their hands on him in some way, then I really do think they can impress next season. And, we could see a team like Millwall push into the playoffs, because they have this idea of it's just teamwork, compared to other teams in the top 10, maybe except Leeds, really. This team works together probably the best, and everyone glues together, and it ends up working in the performances. They were only 3 points off making it into the playoffs, and, you could argue if they didn't, in the last 5 games, if they didn't lose 2 of those games, you might have seen, Millwall sneak in instead of Swansea, but that's all I've got to say about Millwall.
Yeah, I think just before I do touch on to Forest, not Scott, in 7th place. Millwall, I think Gary Rowett just fits Millwall perfectly. That's all I'm going to say on that. I think he is the perfect manager for Millwall. And we're definitely going to keep an eye on them next season and see if they can replicate this season, maybe go a bit further. But moving on to Forest, it's not one I ideally love talking about. It's the first time they've finished above Derby in a long time, in 6 or 7 years. And I think the only joy I can get out of it was how they failed so massively to get into the playoffs at the end of the season. I don't think anyone expected to see them finish 7th up until the 91st minute of the game. No one thought we were going to finish outside the playoffs. But I think on the whole, obviously it's a season review, not a bottle review of the last game of the season. But they've been great for the majority of the season. They have a very similar to Gary Rowett's style of play. Actually, it's very anti-football, and that's not from a biased point of view. It's from watching them play, they've ground out a lot of 1-0 wins. They kind of score and then sit back. It's dirty. It's not pretty to watch, but it gets the job done. One way or another, it's given them it gave them the opportunity to get a top 6 finish, and unfortunately for them, they didn't take it. But yeah, they've been a force to be reckoned this season. Had a really good home form, and they've just been a very, very difficult team to break down. Very solid defence, and I think and we know the majority of Forest fans are gutted, disappointed that they finished 7th. And I think at the start of the season, they were signing quite a few decent players. They've had the links to the Portuguese players coming in, which a lot of fans are excited about quite often. So you probably wouldn't bet against them finishing top 6, to be fair. I think a lot of Forest fans were expecting to finish a lot higher than usual. And if you'd said 7th at the start of the season, would Forest fans have said yes? Then I don't know too many that would have turned it down. But I think given that they were up in the top 6 from Boxing Day right up until the last minute of the last game of the season, then I think it is disappointing for them. But I think realistically, looking back on it, it has been quite a good season for Forest. And unfortunately for them, they've bottled it big time in finishing 7th. But that happens to some teams. I can't relate it to Derby fan. Obviously, I'm not aware what bottling feels like. But yeah, there we go. That's what Forest have done this season, and I don't really want to say their name too many more times, so I'm going to give it to you now.
Yeah, so beating them to the playoffs in 6th place was Swansea. I actually thought this was a really good season for Swansea. No, I don't think anyone really saw them getting into the playoffs in the last minute. Obviously, getting that last goal to get Reading to get ahead of Nottingham Forest. I think that Steve Cooper, he's done a really good job in bringing the youth internationals, or England's youth internationals through. Obviously, getting Rhian Brewster, Conor Gallagher, and Mark Guehi on loan from Chelsea and Liverpool. I thought Andre Ayew coming back into the side after his loan at Fenerbahce the season before. 16 goals and 7 assists for him. He's been their key player this season. Matt Grimes played well in midfield. Joe Rodon, Ben Cabango, really good Welsh centre-backs. I think Swansea have just got a really good, solid team. If they can, rather than loan some young players in, if they can actually bring them in on permanent deals and develop them and bring them through, I think Swansea could definitely be a force next season. They've got quite a young squad, manager who knows young players and can work with them well. I think Swansea definitely have the potential to be a top championship team. But yeah, I think this season they'll definitely take 6th place after last season's mid-table finish under Graham Potter. Obviously, him leaving for Brighton as well. I think Steve Cooper was definitely a smart appointment, as was Graham Potter when they went down. And I think the way that Swansea have run the club since their relegation from the Premier League has just been really good. And I think I can just see them doing really well next season. I think this season they'll definitely look back on it and they'll have high hopes for next season.
So moving on to 5th in the league is Cardiff, a team that recently coming down from the Premier League with Neil Warnock. Warnock decided to leave the club as he said he didn't want to sour his relationship with the fans. So then they brought in Neil Harris, former Millwall man, brought up through Millwall as an assistant and a caretaker. And, Cardiff have been really impressive defensively, especially this season with Sean Morrison and Hayden Flint, having great seasons. Retrospectively, Sean Morrison's picked up 10 Man of the Match awards this season. And you've got players like Joe Riles and, Lee Tomlin's always a sparkle of quality on a squad with 9 goals and 10 assists. But I feel like the only problem with Cardiff this season was having that goal scorer, If, Lee Tomlin with 9 goals as your top scorer, I get it's been spread out with Danny Ward, Hoylett and Riles, even Glasgow getting 7. I feel like if Cardiff want to make that step up, they need to get that big-time striker in. But I feel like Neil Harris can do really well with this Cardiff team. And if I see Cardiff, bring in that striker and, then I really could see high potential. But I feel like also, even with the good defending of 2 players, they've really struggled against players like more skillful players, for example, Ben Rama, Eze, players like that. Cardiff have really struggled against. And yeah, again, these teams always seem to be coming to me. Cardiff are one of those teams that struggle to protect the lead. A few games probably this season that they could have won, it has ended up in draws or losses. So I feel like there's a few. Cardiff are a team that I think I could see again in the playoffs next year. And I honestly, if Cardiff, get the right signings in, bring in a striker, maybe bring in a little more depth at centre back, since players like Sol Bamba are now 35. If they bring in a bit more depth, you could see Cardiff being a shocking thing into what the automatic race, just like they were when they did it in a few years ago with Warnock.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we're moving on to Fulham now, who are a Premier League team somehow. I don't know how they've managed it, to be fair. I think they've had a solid season. I think the main thing about Fulham is that their team is, without doubt, the best, if not the second best team in the league on paper. It's just such a star-studded team. Even, in the playoff final, they had Anthony Knockaert and Alexander Mitrovic coming off the bench. Obviously, I know that Mitrovic isn't usually a player to come off the bench, but the depth they have in that squad for the Championship is unreal. For the Premier League, however, is below par. So it's a difficult one to really delve into, because I think they've had an okay season. I think with Fulham might have had a different manager. Would they have got top two? Maybe. Do I think Scott Parker's masterminded his way back up to the Premier League? No. I think anything less than playoffs would have been a huge failure for Fulham this year. But I mean, fair play. He's gotten back up for the first time of asking, albeit to a little bit of luck. But he's done the job that was put in front of him. He's done what's been asked of him. They've had a good season. Mitrovic, top goal scorer. But you wouldn't expect anything else, really. So I think it's been a pretty standard season for Fulham. I think no one's surprised, really, to see him back up. I think at the start of the season, if you'd have said Fulham to go up, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid. I think going into the final against Brentford, I think a few more people would have been a little bit surprised to see Fulham come out on top in that game. But then Brentford weren't in the best of form heading into the game. So, but fair play to Fulham. I think I don't whether they deserve to go up or not. I'm not too sure, but they've done it one way or another. And I look forward to seeing them in a couple of years' time for the Championship. But I think we're moving on to Brentford now.
Yeah, we'll move on to the playoff final losers, Brentford. Remarkable season for them. I think their form, obviously, apart from the last two games of the season, their form was absolutely ridiculous. They won literally 8 games on the bounce, who pushed the top 2 charge, and then they bottled it against Barnsley and Stoke. And realistically, games they should have been winning. If they had won one of them, they would have got top 2. But Brentford are by far the best run club in the league. They can literally sell anyone and just get someone else in. Danish imports as well. I thought Norgard and Jensen, Marcondes as well, I think is very underrated. Dalsgaard as well. And then obviously we have to talk about BMW, Benrahma, and Mbeumo and Watkins. It does look like Benrahma and Watkins are probably going to leave. I didn't realise Brian Mbeumo was actually 20. I didn't realise he was that young, but Brentford have definitely got a team that should be Premier League. Obviously, we're going into a new stadium for next season as well. I think that'll be massive for them. But yeah, I think Brentford are very unlucky to miss out. I think they definitely deserve to go up to the Premier League. They deserve their shot. But obviously, it's going to be a big summer for them. Whether we'll have to see how many players they lose, and then who they replace those players with. Obviously, Brentford have got a really good track record of replacing their players they lose. So we'll have to see. But honestly, Brentford, I think when you don't take in the playoff final out of account, I think Brentford fans will definitely be very happy with this season. However, would I be optimistic about next season? I'm not sure, purely because it looks like they're going to be losing a lot of their players as well. Obviously, Ollie Watkins apparently now has an 18 million buyout clause after their playoff final loss. So we'll have to wait and see on Brentford. But very good season.
Moving on into the automatic promotion. Second place, we have West Brom, a team that you could argue probably shouldn't, due to form after lockdown, probably shouldn't have been automatic. It probably should have been a team like Brentford. But we have seen, Slaven Bilic, a man who probably everyone agrees is a Premier League quality manager, come into West Brom and bring the best out of players. Charlie Austin and Hal Robson-Kanu, 2 aging strikers, he's been able to get 10 goals each out of them. And then, before we move on to the big standout players, Grady Diangana has been great on loan for West Ham. And, I think going up to the Premier League Village needs to try get Diangana on a permanent for West Brom because he was a great player. And I honestly do believe he can make that step up to the Premier League. But then if we want to talk about, the big standout player for West Brom, it's Matheus Pereira. I do have an issue with his diving antics and stuff like that and him pretending that he's, been given a concussion when no one touches him. But, the man has been absolutely spectacular. He's got the second highest average rating in the Championship, 8 goals and 16 assists. And he has, probably carried a line that should have probably scored more goals. They also have some, Premier League experience in the squad for the locker room players like Chris Brunt, Kieran Gibbs, even if they haven't played a lot, Jake Livermore, players who know how to lead a locker room, and that has really helped. And to be honest with you, West Brom are probably one of the only teams that I can't really see a weakness for in the Championship. They finish the chances they get great, and West Brom are one of those teams that can go into a losing position and actually win from it. They are one of they are a team that probably more often than most this season have been able to come back from losing situations and salvage something out of it. But I think going into the Premier League, West Brom need to look at a striker. Matheus Pereira is definitely Premier League quality. I feel like the problem for West Brom is this is a really good Championship squad, but it's not good enough to be a Premier League squad, and it will be quite interesting to see what happens with West Brom going next year when they're back in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, unfortunately now that Leeds is with Leeds, they've had a great season. They have. You just got to hold your hands up and accept that they've been the best team in the league. I think realistically, when you have a manager like Marcelo Bielsa, you can't it's only going to be so many seasons until he gets promoted. No matter what team he goes to, he's a world-class manager. And for him to be at Leeds is, it shows how well respected Leeds are as a club from the wider football community. And but yeah, no, they've just torn teams apart, haven't they? They've had a great season. I don't think at the start of the year I would have taken them to win the league. I thought my honest prediction is that they would make playoffs. I didn't see them storming the league the way they did. And they've always those little tendencies where you started to see them slipping up a little bit and having a few draws against teams they shouldn't have really drawn against, or having a few losses along the line where you're thinking, oh, this is it, they're going to bottle it again. But they didn't. They actually, they wore their heart on their sleeves, the whole team, and just got to be proud if you're a Leeds fan or if you're a Leeds supporter that your team's done so well. I don't think I've really got as much as I want to have negative things to say about them. I don't really have anything against Leeds this season. I can't say anything bad about the squad. But yeah, there you go. They've been a standout team, obviously with players like Calvin Phillips as well, just dominating midfield and just all over, just the whole squad. And I mean, even the fact that they had Eddie Nketiah come along and he wasn't even really getting a look in shows just how much faith Bielsa had in his squad, really. And Nketiah's then gone back to Arsenal and actually featured and scored a few times. The fact that players like that were in the squad, but they were being used off the bench, I think it shows how much Bielsa had faith in the squad, and I think the squad paid him back for that. He put a lot of trust into players like Patrick Bamford, who, he had an okay season. I don't think he was anything special. I think he's definitely a player that I think will struggle next year. And I think that Leeds do also have a rebuilding job. So I think out of Fulham, West Brom and Leeds, personally, I think Leeds probably have the worst equipped squad going into the Premier League. I think they have the weakest team out of the three. But with a club like Leeds, with the money they've got, with the size of the club, they're not going to find it hard to sign players next year. And I don't see them coming back down, personally. I think they're going to be up for quite a little while now. But yeah, I think on the whole, deserved title winners. It's about time a club the size of Leeds were back in the Premier League, and it would definitely be an interesting side to watch next year.
Yeah, so that is all we've got for the Championship review. We hope you all enjoyed the video, and thank you, Gabriel, for coming on. We'll probably leave Gabriel's socials in the description below, so you can go have a look. great EFL journalist. But before we head off, I want to ask the people watching this video to comment your biggest underperformers and your biggest overperformers of the year. Who do you think that was? You know, we've been here for about 2 years, it feels like. So I feel like if we go on, we're going to be here all day. But thank you. Like, subscribe, follow the socials, follow Gabriel's socials, and goodbye, everyone.